and welcome to season 3 of 70s Daydreams. Thank you all for listening for all of these episodes, and this is going to be our 21st episode. We have been due to do this one for a long time. This is Fritz the Cat. This is a very influential animation from the 70s. It's one of like the main ones, like when you search 70s animation that comes up. It is directed by Ralph Bakshi and based off the character Fritz the Cat by the cartoonist Robert Crumb. And yes, this film is from 1972. It ruffled a lot of feathers, including ours. I believe it was the first animated film to be rated X. It has gotten a lot of mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's a lot. It's very offensive. It's in your face. It's
trigger warning for basically everything you could possibly think of.
All of the things. And so it basically follows the titular character Fritz, which is this sort of womanizing cat that goes around doing drugs and I guess you could say having sex, but lots of times it doesn't seem as consensual as you would hope. But yeah, he's very selfish. He's very misogynistic. He's wild. He doesn't really have many morals, and he's just kind of looking to have a good time.
Yeah, like quasi-political, like kind of wears that as an identity in a way. And he calls himself a writer and a poet very frequently, but he does no writing or poetry throughout the whole piece.
Yeah, he sort of uses the language of social movements of the era in order to like sleep with women. He's not like traditionally macho in that he's like a meathead, but he is sort of like a what's the word? He's just like really sleazy.
Yeah, he's extremely sleazy. Yeah, that's a really good word.
So yeah, the plot is a bit all over the place. That's one issue I have, but it basically just starts off with a lot of his escapades, and he goes to like a party, and then he's like running from the police because they like break into the party and they're like smoking marijuana, and it sort of follows him as he's running from the police, and then he like goes to Harlem, and then he sort of gets caught up in like some type of political, like for a moment he becomes kind of politically active, and then at the end he sort of kind of turns his back. I don't know, like it's kind of a little bit all over the place.
I think he's also a student at NYU because at one point he like burns the building down.
Right. Because he has this realization that like, oh yeah, like school isn't for me and I don't need all these like fake intellectuals. And then he like burns all of his books. But then afterwards he realizes like, oh no, I'm going to fail all my exams and my parents are going to be mad at me. So yeah, he's very much like a man-child. But I mean, he's like, it's funny because you know that he is, and you're like laughing at him. But yeah, so
I think it's meant to be funny. I didn't particularly find it
I didn't
funny,
say it was satirical, but I mean, I do think he's funny because he's an asshole at times, but then sometimes he takes it too far and you're like, ugh, I don't know about this.
How about your overview about what you thought about this movie just in general?
So I saw this movie first when I was like in my late teens. I remember liking it, I think, because it was really kind of like outrageous and crazy. And I liked how there were some moments of send-ups of like white liberals. Like in the very first scene, like there's this scene where these like middle class or upper middle class white women are trying to impress this black character, and it's really funny because it's almost like very contemporary in the way that they're like sort of virtue signaling, and then like the black character sort of plays a game with them and like he's not falling for it. And so I kind of liked how the movie had some of that sort of like satirical. It was like a little bit poking fun at like the counterculture of the time, because I think growing up we were taught that like the counterculture was this really like the hippies and all of this stuff was like this really serious like intellectual thing and like really altruistic, but then the movie was sort of showing how like actually a lot of the people of the time were actually just
trying to fuck and get fucked and
yeah,
fuck
they were
around and get fucked up. Like,
yeah,
like
yeah. It wasn't always about like civil rights and like making the best of things. Sometimes it was just people trying to have sex and do drugs, and there was a lot of pretentiousness and things like that. So I do think that element was funny. But I think the issue I have was it sort of goes a little bit too far against it, to the point where it's like, if you're going to satirize, like, I think you should be able to satirize milquetoast liberals and stuff like that, you know, a la Joan Didion. But I think it like does it to the point where it's like almost comes off as like conservative or something, because it's like, if you're really going to say like, oh yeah, these hippies are all just like phonies, well, like what's the alternative? Like,
yeah, I found it very nihilistic. Like, it was almost just like, well, why even try? Because nothing matters and everybody sucks and humans are terrible. And like, just look at us, look how bad we are. Like, and it's just
yeah.
like,
And I would appreciate if it, I mean, I personally am not a nihilist, but like if it wasn't exactly an equal opportunity nihilist, if you know what I mean, because there's a lot of racial and ethnic jokes and stereotypes, which, you know, it's kind of funny how it kind of reminds me a lot of comedians who say things like, oh yeah, like I make fun of everybody and like humans suck, but then the only people they make fun of are minorities.
yeah, and women.
And women.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of was giving that a little bit. But yeah, it was a little bit disjointed. And oh yeah, and the reason I was bringing up some of these things is because I read that Robert Crumb, the creator of the character Fritz the Cat, did not like the film at all. And
Tried to get the rights back and everything.
yeah, he really hated it. And, you know, he was a leftist and he felt that the film was like overly critical of leftism in like a way that he didn't really agree with.
And also that the characters that he created, he felt that Ralph kind of took and made them into characters that he wouldn't even have conceptualized them to be. Like, what I was reading was he was saying, you know, like Fritz the Cat would have never said that, would have never did that.
Yeah, and that's always like an issue you have when you have someone else adapting your work. But it seems, at least from Robert Crumb's perspective, that it went off the deep end. And but yeah, apparently the film did really well financially.
Really well, yeah. So it grossed like $25 million in the US and I think 98 million worldwide. And at the point that it was made, it was the most successful animated feature of all time.
Damn.
That made me so depressed. Like, it really did. Like, this movie, like, it really did something to me. So, yeah.
If this can bring any solace, I do think that while the film is like highly, highly problematic in many ways, I do think that like perhaps a lot of the reason why it did well is because animation hadn't really been used in like an adult oriented like crass way before, in like
people were like thirsty for that and like ready for it at that specific time. And I read like, you know, this has paved the way for like South Park and Simpsons and like all of that stuff.
It's like, oh my God, you mean an animation where like people are like having sex and doing drugs and doing all this crazy stuff? So I'm sure the word of mouth must have been insane at the time. So that's probably a big reason why, because it's just sort of like this spectacle and it's like over the top. And I think another probably big factor into both the creation of this movie and possibly the reception of it has to do with like, since it came out in like the early 70s. And this is another reason why I find the 70s to be very interesting, is because the 60s were very optimistic, and then by the end of the decade there was this idea that like they failed and that the dream died because of all the assassinations, and the Vietnam War continued to go on, and like, you know, like all these things that happened, like the Beatles broke up and all, and you know, like Nixon gets elected and all these things, and like the turning towards the right, which, you know, has been happening now. And so I think a lot of media in like the early 70s has that nihilistic sort of like, oh, what's the point? Like we failed. And so I think this movie probably is a part of that trend of that era. But once again, I think this is the big difference between media of that era and, yeah, but probably like that era up until at least like maybe the 90s or so, and the media and like critical media now, where I think now people don't think that being offensive is the solution to feeling hopeless. Yeah. Yeah, this movie kind of like reminds me a little bit of like Andrew Dice Clay, who is this controversial comedian, and I want to say like 80s, 90s, where I mean, it was very offensive, and it got to the point where people were like, this isn't actually satirical or anything. You're just like saying really mean things and trying to pass it off as humor. And I think that's kind of how this movie is, but because it's portraying it in this sort of over the top, silly way, it's acting as if it's satirical, but it's not. I'm guessing you really hated the film.
Yeah, I really hated this. I think this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. It's interesting because I was like talking to my brother-in-law about this, and I was saying like it's an abomination, and like what's funny is that I had him watch Pink Flamingos at one point.
Wow. Yeah,
and
that's trashy.
he felt the same way about Pink Flamingos, and then I was like, well, I could see that, like definitely with the end and the shit eating and all of that stuff. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen that, but which, you know, John Waters, if you're listening to this podcast, you might like John Waters, so maybe you could see his movies. But like I was really just trying to figure out why I love anything John Waters does, and it is satire, and it lands for me. I think that this piece just wasn't funny to me. I also really didn't like the visuals of like watching cartoon animals like have sex and see their wieners and their boobs and all. Like that was not for me. I really wanted to like bleach my eyes out afterwards. Like I got through to the end, and then I was like, okay, I need to like meditate or something now, or take a nap, because like I gotta get this out of my system. But yeah, there were very few elements that I really did like about it, or found it funny, or it honestly was very depressing to me. Like I felt like really depressed afterwards. I felt like almost that nihilism where like we're doomed. Like if this is how it was then and this is how it is now, like we're fucked. Like what do we do at this point? And so I guess my solution to all that is just to like talk about this on the podcast and then wipe it from my brain like this movie never existed. Like, because I don't really know how to go on after seeing this movie. Like I know that sounds like really maybe like a hyperbole, but like I hated this movie like so much.
So was it the nihilism of it that got you, or was it like more like the offensive jokes that, I mean, I know both, but like, was there something?
Yeah, I think it's both, but like, it really just reads to me like a white man doing things just so that because he can do them, and to say like all this mean, terrible shit. And it was so misogynistic, and like, it was like rapey. Like, yeah. I did not like the visuals. I think also the fact that they decided to use animals to tell a very human story was very off-putting to me, because like it like desecrates all of life in a way. And again, that sounds like really like hyperbole, but like it's hard for me to even say, like when we were coming to this podcast, I'm like, what am I going to say about this other than I fucking hated it? Like I just hated it.
No, I mean, that's fine. I mean, like we all...
Well, I think there were some interesting things about it when I read the summary of it. I was like, oh wow, like cops are pigs in this movie. Like that's pretty subversive. That's pretty interesting. And that this was like a high grossing movie. And that was the thing. And they do have the commentary about like the culture, and the pig characters are like, let me call them free birds. And I thought that was kind of funny. And like just the slang that they used in it, I liked. There's a sequence with pool balls bouncing on a black screen, which I thought was really nice. Like that was towards the end. Fritz the cat, when he's like on his cross country trip with like the only sane female character, in the
or sane character
period in the whole film, and he basically falls asleep for 2 days, and then she wakes him up because the car needs fixing. And I thought this part was like one of the only funny parts, but they're driving like a Volkswagen Beetle, and he goes to the front part of the car to check out the engine. Then he goes, I knew the whole time that the engine's in the back. Like he obviously didn't, that was a cute little part. But the part pretty close to that where that guy just killed all the chickens in the back of the truck, like fuck that. Like I just don't want to watch that kind of stuff. Like I don't want to watch any of this. Like it doesn't make me feel good about being human or being alive, or like make me think about anything of substance or depth. Like this, it's almost like just totally pointless and just like really shocking for the value of being shocking. And I don't see any value in that. Like it's shocking enough just living. Like I don't need to watch that kind of thing. And maybe some people do because they haven't had a lived experience where like, really awful shit has happened to them. And I mean, I don't know anything about this guy or whatever, because I did some research, but at that point too, I was also like, I'm done. I don't want to give this man any more of my time than he's already gotten. And he shouldn't have had the runtime anyways. Yeah, I feel so strongly about this one. And usually like with the podcast, it's important to me that it's like entertaining, or that like, I find some kind of value in it. But like this one just was not that for me. So.
Yeah, I think the girlfriend character was good, but I kind of wanted more of her because, when she shows up, she sort of speaks a lot of truth about how, oh yeah, like if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have anything, and you're just like she's talking to Fritz about how he's so selfish, and he's just he thinks he can just sort of float about and just like follow his emotions and not be responsible. And she's like, no, you can't live like that.
And she's like, you're lucky that a smart woman like me like is taking care of you and giving you the time of day and all this. Yeah. And then he's like making the womp 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 kind of with his hand towards the camera.
But yeah, it's like that was like a moment where like he sort of someone puts him in his place, but he doesn't really get put in his place because she keeps putting up with him. And then nothing really bad happens to him. And then it was interesting at the end because he's hanging out in Harlem with like the black characters who are portrayed by crows. And there was some interesting elements there. But one thing that I found that was interesting is he gets sort of caught up in this sort of like Black Panther-esque liberation thing. And then he essentially causes a riot, which ends up hurting the black community. But
like all those people would really listen to him anyways. Like, whatever. Yeah. Like, fuck.
But it was wild because so he goes from, like, oh yeah, we should stick it to the man and everything. But when he goes to get gas for the car, he runs into this motorcycle guy and his girlfriend.
A Nazi.
Well, yeah.
A Nazi rabbit, like one of the best animals there is, and they made him a Nazi. Like, God.
And it was very strange because he like hitches a ride with them, and they go to this like castle, which is like the meeting ground for their cult. And I was kind of confused because it's like this weird sex violence cult thing, but then they also want to blow up a power plant in order to like disrupt society. And I was kind of confused as to like what change did they want by doing that? Or did they just want to create chaos? And like, why did they want to blow up this power plant? It wasn't really clear. It was very kind of just like chaotic. At one point I was like, did they just put like a swastika on this like motorcycle just to be offensive and ridiculous because it didn't necessarily. I wasn't really sure what it added to this plot, but it was interesting because like right before they make Fritz put the dynamite in the power plant, right before it's about to explode, he's like has a realization, and Fritz is like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do this," you know. The love you give is equal to love you get, which is a Beatles line. And then everything explodes. And I was just like, I feel like I I don't know. Maybe like it almost feels like this guy was either just not smart enough to figure out. Like I feel like sometimes there are people who know how to create um contrasts or like scenes that are like really jarring, but that doesn't mean it has any meaning to it. And I was like, why is he saying this Beatle lyric right before he gets blown up? And I get that it was maybe sort of like this absurdist thing of like talking about love and then you explode, which I like that contrast. But it doesn't really answer anything. And movies don't necessarily need to provide answers, but when you create a film where you're specifically talking about race issues, you can't like do a 180 and be like, oh, well, you know, I don't have answers. I don't know. Like, well, you brought up the issues to begin with,
Right.
so you can't. So yeah, I mean, it is. And I wanted to say one last thing. Another issue I had with the film was the dialogue. It almost felt like they were all just like huddled together around a microphone and were just like riffing.
Yeah.
Because I found the dialogue kind of hard to understand because everyone was sort of like speaking
Totally.
like at the same time or like really low.
So I did find some information about that, which was that actually this movie was not professionally, like did not have professional auditory engineering in some senses, because what he actually did is go out and use documentary recordings. Like he went to like a black bar where the crows were. That part was specifically really hard to hear, and because those were actual conversations.
Like a field recording.
I think all the rabbis in the congregation were his like dad and uncle or something like that. That was actually recordings of them. And then there was another recording. I can't remember which one it was for, but like, yeah, I found it really hard to hear at a lot of points too. And I will say, like, for watching this one too, I found it on archive.org and it's in 8 parts. So like, do not pay to see this movie if you are still thinking you might see it even after everything that we've said. But it's free on archive.org. And at first I thought, oh, it's just bad quality, but it like really is.
It was independently produced, right?
Yeah.
This is like an indie animation.
I think so.
Slight addendum. The film was initially financed by Warner Brothers, but funding was pulled after the first test screening. Then Ralph had to find funding elsewhere. That is an interesting way of going about things. I know that another animation, Midnight Gospel, I believe that's came from one of the creators of Adventure Time. And
oh, right, yes.
And it's actually sourced from like a podcast or something, or like a conversation, and then they animated to it. And I think that's a really interesting concept of like taking audio from other sources. But that is an interesting sort of like reverse engineering process. But yeah, it just had this like conversational tone to it that is kind of hard to hear. I mean, I watch everything with subtitles, so you know. But I guess we could talk a little bit about, even though this film is very much has a lot wrong with it, it did have an impact on a lot subsequent generations of animators, and showed that animation is something that is not just for kids. Though animation was never initially just for kids anyway, that's a common misconception. All of those like Looney Tunes animations were actually shown in theaters, like either like before films, and like they were enjoyed by everyone. They weren't specifically, it was only after they were put onto television.
That they were like networked for children.
Yeah. Specifically, this film is a film that is like explicitly for adults. And yeah, I mean, we see now there's so many animations that are specifically for adults, whether it's Rick and Morty, Family Guy, Simpsons, or I mean, I say adults. I mean, I guess or older, because I mean, there are teenagers and even like younger people who watch The Simpsons and such, but specifically not kids.
Yeah, like I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons when I was a kid, so.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it has had a huge impact.
But you know what also has a huge impact? Like a forest fire, like a nuclear bomb.
That's
like,
true.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about this, in the sense that like it just obliterates everything. Like it's just so, and I guess maybe, like ecologically, sometimes it's like you need a disturbance in order for like new things to grow or something like that. And maybe that is the value that comes out of this. I'm not trying to sit here and say that like because I hated it, everyone should hate it and it's the worst thing ever. Like you form your own opinion about it, obviously, but like if you're making a piece of art with the intent for it to be controversial, like people are going to hate it and they're going to like, criticize it and
on those grounds.
Yeah. So like, I don't want to say you're asking for it, but like he would be fine to say that, I'm sure.
I don't want to like make excuses, be like, oh, it's of the time. But yeah, I mean, it's a large part of, I can't speak to other countries, but a large part of American humor throughout its history has been offensive, and not all of it, obviously. There's plenty of examples of humor that is not offensive in the past. But yeah, I mean, it is a type of humor that is instantly sellable.
Yeah, it's like the lowest common denominator,
Yeah.
really. And honestly, just like the misogyny in this is so much for me to like digest. Like I know that, there's elements of that in lots of the other things that we've watched, but this one in particular was like really, really grating for me. Like I think that was a huge reason, because it's like the first female characters really that you see, they've got their tits out like within seconds, and they're just like, oh, we're so giddy and so happy to have an orgy with like Fritz the cat and like disappear into this bathtub with him. And then it's like you see everything on them too. Like it's just, yeah.
And the thing is like about being controversial, like you can create something that is controversial, that is provocative, that is sensational, that is not necessarily offensive, or at least not racist or those things. Because, I think about, I mean, specifically Rick and Morty. I mean, I don't want to speak for the entirety of Rick and Morty, but like Rick and Morty is a show that tackles a lot of tough questions and is very over the top and ridiculous and crazy, but it doesn't resort to those bottom of the barrel gags in the same way as this
Not
did.
all the time. It definitely has instances of it, but yeah, for the most part, it's like, I would say like 95% of it is pretty like highbrow type of like satire.
Yeah. I think this idea that, oh, well, if I can't say this, then like, oh, what am I going to say? Like, we can't say anything anymore. You can, because you can ruffle feathers. Like, there are ways you can challenge people. It's just sometimes a bit artistically lazy to just rest on the laurels of the same tropes of misogyny and racism again, over and over again. But yeah, so that's like a big issue. And I just felt that the story also was very jumbled. Like it didn't quite make sense, and like some of the timing was a bit strange. But I am, happy that I like revisited, and yeah, this is like a big film of the time, and yes, we will be back with more. If there's anything else you'd like to say.
Yeah, just that this one was 70s nightmares, but we'll be back to 70s daydreams in our next episode.
All right. Bye.
Bye.